Hello and welcome to this Come to Jesus Daily devotional as we continue in the Gospel of Luke. And today we're going to be looking at Luke 20 verses 20 to 40, and we're considering how if power, influence and power is our God, then we become deaf to Jesus. We can't hear him, we can't respond to him, we can't follow him as we should. And we're going to see that in the example of the religious leaders throughout this next section. And we're going to be beginning with this portrait of when power is our God. And then secondly, in our next devotional, we're going to be looking at when pride is our God. And then finally, when we're going to look at the example of the widow who gave the very small offering, all that she had to live on, we're seeing an example of when God is our God, how we live. So if power is our God, we become deaf to Jesus. And we see that these religious leaders are out to kill Jesus. He's just told them, if you remember our previous devotionals, about the parable of the vineyards, the parable of the minas, and very different parables and teachings that have basically taught that many of the religious leaders and those in Israel will reject Jesus and they will kill him. And they know that he's talking about them as they reject their Messiah, because they're not really interested in truth, many of them. And many of the people around us are not really interested in truth. And our flesh, often we're not really that interested in truth. Our desire for power and influence can sometimes trump those things, as we see in these accounts. So firstly, we see these political maneuverings seeking to undermine Jesus. They want political power, you see, because they're ruled by Rome, and they want to remain in a position of power by colluding with Rome. But they want to make it look like Jesus is the enemy. So we read in Luke 20, verses 20 to 22, keeping a close watch on him, they sent spies who pretended to be sincere. They hoped to catch Jesus in something he said so that they might hand him over to the power and authority of the governor. So the spies questioned him. "Teacher, you teach what is right, and that you do not show partiality, but teach in ways that are in accordance with truth, what is right." And it says, they then ask this question, is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? So you see, they tried to back him into a corner by saying, you are a man of integrity, you always tell the truth. They're kind of flattering him, really. And unlike them, who when Jesus asked them about the baptism of John the Baptist, they refused to answer because they didn't want to make themselves look bad because they love power. Now they're trying to they think they can do the same to Jesus. We're going to back you into a corner. You are a man of integrity, flattery, flattery. And they think he's going to say something like, yes, pay tax to Caesar, in which case he loses the crowds who hate the Romans. Or no, in which case he brings down Rome upon him, and the religious leaders get Rome to do their dirty work and to kill Jesus. And they're trying to make Jesus, they're trying to discredit Jesus. Firstly, they're trying to make him look like an idolater, a false worshipper, but this backfires. And we read, continuing in Luke 20, 23 to 26, he saw through their duplicity and said to them, show me a denarius, whose image and inscription, notice those words, image and inscription are on it. Caesar's, they replied. He said to them, then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. They were unable to trap him in what he said in public, and astonished by his answer, they became silent. Jesus sees through their duplicity. They look like searchers for truth, but no, they're not. They're duplicitous. They're seeking to undermine Jesus. They love power. They don't want truth. They want to maintain their power, and they want to destroy Jesus, who is threatening them. And they're deaf to Jesus, because in receiving him as their Messiah, they're going to lose political power, religious power, and so on. And this Jesus' response is very clever, and it's designed to make us stop and think, isn't it? I wouldn't be so quick thinking, and maybe we promise the Holy Spirit will give us wisdom when we're under pressure. May that be the case, but he clearly is very wise. And it reminds me of a saying in the book, The Fellowship of the Rings. And J.A.R. Tolkien, when Bilbo Baggins, before he leaves the Shire, gives this party and then a speech at which time he says this: I don't know half of you, half as well as I should like. I like less than half of you, half as well as you deserve. It sounds good. You have to think about it. What does he mean? Is he complimenting them? Is he undermining them? You have to think. And likewise with this, what does he mean? And it silences everyone. But it's very powerful what he's saying. Firstly, they want to make him look like a compromised worshipper. In fact, they want to make him look like he's verging on idolatry, tainted with idolatry. They're trying to undermine Jesus' reputation. Because if he says, yes, pay tax to Caesar, he could be accused of being disloyal to God and endorsing idolatry. Now, why is that the case? Because Roman taxation required the paying of coins with Caesar's image on it and inscription that speaks of Caesar as being Son of God. So they're trying to make Jesus look like he's verging on idolatry, but the reality is they themselves, who has the coin? They do. So they make themselves look tainted. They undermine themselves. Jesus is very clever. And he cleverly puts both God and Caesar in their rightful place. Give to Caesar what's Caesar's, and there's a lot to be thought about that. But give to God what is God's. In other words, yes, of course. Obey Caesar, pay tax to Caesar, be a good citizen, but remember, God is worthy of everything. So our allegiance to any political power, that's true for us now, isn't it? Allegiance to any political power, while seeking to be good citizens, our allegiance to any political power is never to trump God's authority and our worship. We must never compromise our worship in obedience to the law and to our authorities. We must always obey God. So you can see here, Jesus cleverly puts God in his place as truly God, and he cleverly puts Caesar in his place as a man and under God, whilst not undermining himself, right? He's very clever. Whilst they're trying to be duplicitous, they're not seeking for truth at all. They're just seeking to hold on to power. And we move on to this second group of people, the Sadducees, who believe there is no resurrection and no life after death, that the soul or the spirit after death no longer exists. And they come to Jesus and they want to challenge him. Again, they're not seeking for truth. Again, it's power they want. They have positions of power in the temple. They have positions of power in their relationship with Rome. They want to hold on to that position of power. They're not seeking for truth. They're seeking to undermine Jesus and exalt themselves. So they come to him and seemingly speak to him about this scenario where a wife dies, another wife dies, another wife dies. Well, if that's true, who's she married to in heaven or in the resurrection? Seemingly, they've got this watertight argument that's going to cause Jesus to look like a fool because he's been talking about resurrection, he's been talking about life after death. There is life after death. There is resurrection, his resurrection, our future resurrection, but they're seeking to undermine it. And Jesus simply refutes them, revealing that, yes, there is resurrection. Yes, it's true. There is life after death. We could go into this. He talks about marriage and how marriage there will not be marriage in the resurrection. We could talk about that at length. But the point he's making is that there is life after death and there is resurrection. And that's why he proves life after death by talking about Moses and talking about Abraham and talking about Isaac and Jacob as being alive even though they are dead. And he says these words: he's not the God of the dead, but of the living. For to him all are alive. So we see this idea of when we love power and when power is our God, we will compromise. We won't fully endorse Jesus. In fact, we might hide our faith because we love power more than God, more than Jesus. We need to be open about our faith. Wise, of course, not foolish, but open, particularly about the gospel. We love Jesus, don't we? We want to tell people we love Jesus. We believe Jesus died for sin. We need to tell people he died for sin. Jesus is alive. We need to tell people he's alive. Like Jesus, we need to be wise. We need to use words directed by the Holy Spirit. Clever words if we can. Useful words, helpful words. But we want to seek to bring people to Jesus with power must not be our God. So that's the challenge, isn't it? Is power our God? Do we hold on to power, prestige and status at the cost of truth? Influence and power can be a great force for good, right? We could be led into politics. We could be led into management. We could be led into leadership. We could be opening businesses and so on. But this requires great prayer and support, because we can easily begin to put our power and our career and our prestige above Jesus. And that is dangerous. So it can be a force for good, but when tested, do we compromise our faith to protect our position? God bless you.